He built the Vegas you fell in love with. Then a single headline tore it all apart. This is the story of how one man created a billion-dollar empire, changed the soul of Las Vegas forever, and then watched it crumble in a matter of days. Part 1. The kid nobody believed in. Before the volcanoes, before the fountains, before the gold lettering on the side of a billion-dollar tower that bore his name, there was just a kid with a problem and a promise to keep. Steve Wynn did not grow up with money. His father ran illegal bingo halls back east. Small time, shady, always one step ahead of the law. And when his father died, he didn't leave behind a savings account or a piece of real estate. He left behind gambling debts, the kind of debts you don't owe to a bank. Most kids in that situation walk away. They change their name, move to a new city, and never look back. Steve Wynn did the opposite. He paid every single cent. Every last dollar his father owed, he tracked down and settled. That choice tells you everything you need to know about the man. It wasn't generosity, it was obsession. An obsession with winning, with proving something, with never letting the world see him sweat. By 1972, the kid nobody took seriously had quietly maneuvered his way into a controlling interest in a small downtown property called the Golden Nugget. He was still in his early 30s. Most people his age were figuring out their first real job. Steve Wynn was already rewriting what a casino could be. He renovated it, cleaned it up, made it feel like somewhere you actually wanted to spend your time instead of somewhere you ended up because nothing else was open at 3 in the morning. And it worked. People noticed, the industry noticed, and Steve Wynn started thinking bigger. A lot bigger. Part 2. The Mirage changes everything. Here's what you have to understand about Las Vegas before November 1989. The Strip was tired. Cheap carpet, flickering neon, buffets that had seen better decades. The whole place felt like it was running on fumes from the Rat Pack era. Nobody was building anything new. Nobody was taking any real chances. Then Steve Wynn announced he was going to build a casino for $630 million. Wall Street thought he'd lost his mind. The average strip casino cost maybe $200 million at the time. Wynn was going to need to earn more than $1 million every single day just to service the debt. Financial analysts lined up to tell him why it couldn't work. He nodded, smiled, and kept building. On November 22, 1989, the Mirage opened its doors. More than 40,000 people poured through the entrance in the first 30 minutes. 40,000 people in half an hour. The city hadn't seen anything like it. And what did they find inside? White tigers in a glass habitat in the middle of the casino floor. A volcano out front that erupted on a schedule, shooting fire into the desert sky every night while tourists stood on the strip with their mouths open. A rainforest atrium in the lobby. A permanent Siegfried and Roy show. It wasn't just a casino. It was a spectacle. It was a theme park for adults who wanted to feel like they were somewhere extraordinary. The critics were wrong. The Mirage didn't just hit that $1 million a day target, it destroyed it. Vegas tourism jumped 16% in 1990 alone, one of the biggest single-year surges in the city's history. The governor at the time compared Wynn to Walt Disney, and honestly, at that moment, it wasn't even an exaggeration, because what Steve Wynn had done wasn't just build a hotel. He had changed the entire theory of what Las Vegas was supposed to be. Before the Mirage, Vegas sold you cheap, 99-cent shrimp cocktails, $5 blackjack, loss-leader buffets piled high with food. Nobody cared if you ate as long as you stayed near the tables. Wynn flipped that. He said you could charge people more, make everything more beautiful, more impressive, more jaw-dropping, and people would come in even bigger numbers. He was right, and in being right, he planted a seed that would slowly, over decades, change Las Vegas into something very different from what regular people had always loved about it. But we'll get to that. Part 3. Treasure Island, the Bellagio, and the machine that never stopped. If the Mirage made Wynn a legend, Treasure Island made him a showman. He built it right next door, where the Mirage's parking lot used to stand, and opened it in October 1993 for $450 million. Out front, pirates battled in a full-scale lagoon every single night. Real explosions. Ships that actually appeared to sink. Crowds lining the Strip sidewalk, cheering like they were watching a championship game. Inside, he brought in Cirque du Soleil for their first permanent Las Vegas residency. He understood before anyone else that people didn't just come to Vegas to gamble anymore. They came to be entertained. They came to feel something they couldn't feel at home. He gave them that feeling, and then let the casino floor do the rest. But even Treasure Island was just the warm-up. On October 15, 1998, the Bellagio opened. $1.6 billion, the most expensive hotel ever built at the time. And it wasn't just expensive. It was deliberately, self-consciously, unapologetically expensive in a way that Las Vegas had never allowed itself to be before. The lobby ceiling was covered in thousands of hand-blown glass flowers, a massive installation by artist Dale Chihuly that took nearly 2 years to complete. The fountains out front danced to Sinatra, to opera, to whatever song felt right for that exact moment. There was a fine art gallery inside with actual Picassos, actual Monets, real Van Goghs hanging on the wall in the middle of a casino in the Nevada desert. The average room rate at the Bellagio was $200 a night when it opened. Every other hotel on the Strip was averaging around $81, and people paid it. They came from everywhere in the world, and they paid it. Here's the thing, though. The Bellagio wasn't really built for you. Not for the regular guy saving up for a weekend away. It was built for the whales, the ultra-high rollers who thought in $1,000 chips. Private gaming salons with minimum bets most people couldn't even contemplate. Bungalows that cost $1,200 a night and weren't even listed on the website. They were by invitation only. Vegas had always had high rollers, but Wynn had made chasing them the entire point of the exercise, and in doing so, he had shifted the city's center of gravity in a way that would play out over the next 2 decades in ways even he probably didn't anticipate. Then in June 2000, he sold everything. Mirage Resorts, the entire collection of properties he had spent his life building, went to MGM Grand for $6.6 billion, $21 a share. He walked away with a fortune and a legacy that was already set in stone. But Steve Wynn was never built for retirement. Part 4. Wynn Las Vegas and the empire that bore his name. 5 weeks before the sale to MGM had even officially closed, he spent $270 million to buy the Desert Inn, one of the Strip's oldest, most storied properties. Then he tore it down. He wasn't slowing down. He was reloading. On April 28, 2005, Wynn Las Vegas opened. $2.7 billion, his name, in gold letters, on the side of the building. He said it himself in the opening footage. This is the only hotel he'd ever put his name on. Everything before had been a building up to this, and the Wynn was extraordinary. Even by the standard he had set with the Bellagio, it was something else. The floral mosaic floors, the private lake out front that shimmered like glass, every surface, every corridor, every detail designed to communicate one thing before you even reached your room. You're somewhere that cost more than you can imagine to build, and we want you to feel that. It worked. Of course it worked. Steve Wynn didn't know how to build something that didn't work. Then he went international. In September 2006, Wynn Macau opened in the Chinese territory that had just begun allowing foreign casino operators for the first time. And what started as a bold gamble turned into the biggest payday of his career. By late 2017, Macau operations were generating roughly $1.3 billion out of Wynn Resorts' total $1.7 billion in revenue. That's 76% of the entire company's income coming from one territory half a world away from Nevada. He had done it again. He had looked somewhere nobody else was looking, and he had been right about it. Back on the Strip, he followed Wynn Las Vegas with the Encore, which opened in December 2008. Another tower, another layer of luxury. Then, in 2016, in Macau's Cotai district, he opened the Wynn Palace at a cost of $4.1 billion. Gondolas gliding across a performance lake, 1,700 rooms, designs so lavish people described walking through it like stepping into a royal fantasy. From the outside, the Steve Wynn story looked like something that only ends one way: more money, more buildings, more cities, more empires. His name glowing gold on every skyline he touched. Then came January 2018, Part 5, the headline that ended everything. The Wall Street Journal broke the story on January 26, 2018. It wasn't a rumor. It wasn't speculation. It was a detailed, sourced investigation describing a pattern of sexual misconduct allegations stretching back years, dozens of employees, incidents that ranged from unwanted advances to allegations of assault. And crucially, a $7.5 million settlement paid to a manicurist who had worked at his flagship property, a settlement that had never been disclosed during the company's gaming license applications. Within hours of the story publishing, Wynn Resorts stock dropped nearly 10%. That single day wiped out approximately $2 billion in market value. By the following Monday, it had dropped another 9%, closing at around $165 a share, an 18% collapse in under a week. Morgan Stanley downgraded the company. UBS downgraded the company. The institutional money that had spent years riding Wynn Resorts to record highs started heading for the exits. Within 24 hours, Wynn resigned as finance chairman of the Republican National Committee. The Nevada Gaming Control Board opened an investigation. The Massachusetts Gaming Commission opened an investigation. Macau regulators opened an investigation. Every major regulatory body connected to any property bearing his name was suddenly looking very closely at exactly what they knew and when they knew it. 10 days after the story broke, Steve Wynn resigned as CEO and chairman of Wynn Resorts. The empire he had built, the company that carried his name on every sign, every tower, every playing card, was no longer his. In his resignation letter, he said he could not continue to be effective in his role. That was the quiet, corporate language of a man who had run out of options. His longtime protege, Matthew Maddox, stepped in as CEO, and by April of that same year, Wynn had sold off his entire 12% ownership stake, roughly $2.4 billion worth of stock, at prices far below what they'd been before the story broke. Part 6. The Investigations and the Reckoning. After the resignation, the investigation didn't close. It got bigger. In October 2019, the Nevada Gaming Control Board filed a 5-count, 23-page complaint against Steve Wynn personally. They had spent 7 months going through everything. What they found was that harassment complaints against him dated back as far as 2005, the same year he first received his executive gaming license. The board stated plainly that Wynn was not a person of good character, honesty, or integrity, and that he was unsuitable to be associated with the gaming industry. There was no softening of that language, no room for interpretation. The body that had licensed him, the body that had given his company the legal right to operate in Nevada for decades, said he should never have been there. In February 2019, Wynn Resorts itself had already been hit with a $20 million fine from Nevada regulators, the largest in state history at that point. The company had failed to investigate or report the misconduct allegations. They knew what was happening, and they said nothing. Massachusetts was just as thorough. The Gaming Commission there released a 200-page report after interviewing more than 100 people across 6 states. They found that executives had known about multiple allegations and concealed them. They found the company had failed to disclose the $7.5 million settlement during its own license application. On April 30, 2019, they fined Wynn Resorts $35 million and fined CEO Matthew Maddox $500,000 personally for not ordering an investigation when a complaint reached his desk. They also required the company to separate the roles of CEO and chairman for 15 years and submit to ongoing third-party monitoring. And in a decision that drew plenty of criticism, they allowed the company to keep its license anyway. The $2.6 billion Encore Boston Harbor opened its doors just weeks later. By then, Wynn's name had already quietly disappeared from the building's signage. The legal fallout kept coming: shareholder lawsuits, pension funds, investors who accused the board of hiding what it knew for years. The company eventually agreed to pay $70 million to settle those claims. And in July 2023, after years of appeals that went all the way to the Nevada Supreme Court, Steve Wynn personally agreed to pay a $10 million settlement to Nevada regulators, the largest individual penalty in the state's history. As part of the agreement, he accepted that he would never again apply for a gaming license in Nevada, the state he built his career in. The state his name was still glowing over in gold letters. He would never be licensed there again. He admitted no wrongdoing. That's the official record. But the message from every regulator, every court, every investigation was the same. The era was over. Part 7. What the empire left behind. The business survived. You have to say that because it's true. Wynn Resorts cut its debt by $1.2 billion after the scandal. They announced a $1 billion stock buyback. They secured the first-ever gaming license in the United Arab Emirates, a luxury resort scheduled to open in 2027. In Macau, they renegotiated their casino concession in December 2022, locking in their future in the world's largest gambling market. The current CEO, Craig Billings, has spent years working to rebuild the company's reputation and distance it from what happened under its founder. New board members, new oversight structures, a harassment hotline, worker protections that, honestly, should have always been there. From a pure business standpoint, Wynn Resorts is still standing. The company is still profitable. The properties still attract guests. The name still glows on the Strip. But there's another ledger, one that doesn't show up in any earnings report. Steve Wynn sold us a version of Las Vegas, a version where you could walk in off the street, a regular person with a regular budget, and for one weekend feel like $1 million. The Mirage volcano going off outside while you stood on the sidewalk with a beer you could actually afford. A blackjack table with a $5 minimum where a dealer who knew your name wished you luck. A buffet where a retired school teacher from Ohio could eat alongside a tech executive from San Francisco, and neither one felt out of place. That Vegas is mostly gone now. And while Steve Wynn didn't destroy it single-handedly, he lit the fuse. He proved that people would pay more. He proved that luxury at scale was possible. And once he proved it, every corporate owner that came after him used that proof to justify pushing further and further and further until the regular people who built this city with their savings and their excitement and their loyalty found themselves priced out of the paradise they helped create. The table minimums never came back down after he set the precedent. The slots only got tighter. The resort fees didn't disappear when he left. They multiplied. The comps dried up. The free parking vanished. Everything he started in the pursuit of a better product eventually became the excuse for every nickel-and-dime strategy that followed. His name is still on 2 properties on the Strip. You can still walk past and see it glowing at night. And somewhere in that image is the whole complicated, painful, fascinating story of Las Vegas itself. A city built on the promise that anyone could come here and feel like a king, slowly transformed into a place that only wants you if you can afford the premium tier. Steve Wynn didn't intend that. Or maybe he did, and just didn't think about the consequences. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle, the way it usually is with men like him. What he built was magnificent. The Mirage, the Bellagio, Treasure Island with the pirates in the lagoon, and kids standing on their parents' shoulders on the Strip to see the ships go down. Those things were real. They were extraordinary. They were the kind of magic that a city like Las Vegas only produces once in a generation. But what he left behind wasn't just magnificent buildings. It was a blueprint. And other people read that blueprint very carefully, and they built something with it that he probably would have found ugly. Part 8. The question that nobody wants to answer. Here's what I keep coming back to. When the Nevada Gaming Control Board said Steve Wynn was unsuitable to be associated with the gaming industry, they were talking about one man, but the industry he built, the model he created. The race to the top that he started, that kept going long after he walked out the door. The companies that took over what he built, that bought his properties and managed his legacy, they didn't reverse course, they accelerated. Resort fees that didn't exist when Wynn was building his empire are now $40 to $55 a night. Blackjack tables that once paid 3 to 2 now pay 6 to 5, quietly increasing the house edge in ways most tourists never notice until it's too late. Slot machines on the Strip pay back at their lowest rates in decades. Buffets that used to cost $10 are $60 now, or gone entirely. The workers who told him for years what was happening on those floors are still there. The cocktail waitresses, the housekeepers, the dealers, the security guards. They're still working the same buildings he built. Only now they're watching the crowd thin out, the tips disappear, the regulars stop coming back. They're watching a city eat itself alive trying to chase a customer it already lost. Steve Wynn may be gone from Las Vegas, but his fingerprints are on every wall, the good ones and the bad ones. That's the real legacy. Not the fountains, not the glass flowers in the Bellagio lobby, not the volcano that erupted every night for 35 years before they tore it down to build a guitar-shaped hotel tower. The legacy is what Las Vegas became when a whole industry decided that luxury was the only direction worth moving in, and regular people, the ones who used to be the heartbeat of this city, became the collateral damage. Steve Wynn lost everything: the title, the license, the seat at the table he'd spent a lifetime building. But the version of Las Vegas he made possible, the one that keeps squeezing the customer harder every single year, that's still very much alive. And I don't know if that's a tragedy or just the honest story of how ambition works. Maybe it's both. If you've felt the change yourself, if you remember the old Vegas and can't quite find it anymore, drop your story in the comments. I want to hear it. And if this kind of real talk about what's actually happening to this city is the kind of content you want more of, hit subscribe, because we're just getting started.